This is basically for a lot of people now have been switching positions. And what I'm talking about today is really the reasons that I think it's important to either look for or search for a new position in a law firm. And a lot of people make a lot of mistakes when it comes to this. They will search for jobs when they shouldn't be searching for jobs. They will accept jobs they shouldn't search for. And many times it's the best decision you can often make is to stay with the law firm that you're currently at. That's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today is the reasons you might want to stay or go to a new firm. And we counsel people for a living whether or not to take or accept jobs. And because we're a placement firm, we don't necessarily ever try to sell people on something. We just try to provide information and give non-biased advice whether or not it's a good move for people to take a new job and or look for a job. And this is today's some of the reasons. So the biggest thing that law firms want to know when they're trying to hire someone is really why that person's looking for a new job. They will look at any cover letter you write and so forth that we write, or any cover letter that you write. They'll look for that information. They'll look for that information. It'll be one of the first questions they ask. And really, when law firms are interviewing, especially when the market's not that hot, they're very interested in understanding why the person's moving. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I'll go into today. But your reasons for looking for a new position are very important, because the law firm knows that if you're moving for the wrong reasons, and you're also going to leave them for the wrong reasons. And a lot of times people have very trivial reasons for wanting to get a new position. And then the law firm knows they're probably going to have that. And so if you think about it from the standpoint of an employer trying to build a business, they want to hire people that are going to stick around. And if you're looking for the wrong reasons, it may indicate that you're good at your job, or you don't want to be an attorney, and all sorts of things. And people, especially young attorneys, think that their education and experience is relevant, and that will certainly get the firm's attention. But to really get in the door and hired, the law firm's always going to want to know why you're looking. And there's really no other question that matters. And it's the most important by far. And when the law firm decides not to interview you, or after they have interviewed you and they say they're not going to go forward, typically they'll just say something like not enough experience, or they'll give very generic explanations for why they're not moving forward with you. But really what it comes down to most of the time is that they think you're looking for a job for the wrong reasons. Now, you may not be a good cultural fit and other things, but most of the time, they think it's the wrong reasons. And if they think you're looking for the wrong reasons, they're going to think that you're probably not going to stay with them either, because they want people that are going to be stable, work hard, and not be trouble. And people looking for the wrong reasons are generally going to be, there's going to be signs that there's going to be drama and trouble. And people really want to hire people that are looking for the jobs for the right reasons. It's just very important to understand those reasons. And this is probably the wrong thing to say from a guy that's been divorced a couple of times, but joining a firm should be a decision that's as serious as choosing a marriage partner. If you make reckless decisions, or you make decisions from a moment of weakness, or you're just not ready for something like that to make a decision, you may pay a terrible price. People, for example, get married for a variety of reasons. They may get married because they're compatible. They may get married because they feel like there's a mutual support of money or something that each of them can give each other. Their social mobility. Sometimes people will move up the pecking order. Sometimes people will get together because they think that there's some looks or attraction or security, companionship, all sorts of things. But the thing is that the reasons that people marry a lot of times are wrong. And the majority of marriages actually end in divorce. And most attorneys end up moving firms many times, and often several times, and ending up in environments where they're not happy. And a job is very important. And if you want to get hired by a good firm, you really need to know your reasons for looking for a new job and accepting a new job. You have to go into this with a good head on your shoulders and know exactly what it is you're looking for. Because if you don't, you're going to make mistakes. And I see people make mistakes in their job search all the time. And a job search is very important, because if you choose correctly, you could wind up in a place where you'll be happy. And it's just very easy to make bad decisions. Everywhere you look, there's people trying to get you bad decisions. That's one reason at BCG, we absolutely do not try to get people to take offers. I mean, we'll tell them why it's a good offer, why it's a bad offer, but most of these decisions are yours. And there's a hundreds of thousands of factors that go into people's decisions to accept offers or to look for a job. And I'm not going to get into all of them. I'll talk about the big ones. But not too long ago, I was looking for a new home, and everywhere around me there were people trying to get me to make bad decisions. One real estate agent incredibly tried to talk me into purchasing a 2-bedroom home for 3 kids, my wife, a dog, and a bird, which is incredible because she actually meant it just because it was her listing. She was trying to get a commission. A mortgage broker tried to get me to go into a dangerous mortgage that would have been very dangerous and hurt me. Another real estate agent got me an offer for my home and told me it was the best offer I would ever get, and then ultimately received an offer for $400,000 more. And then also there were lots of homes that I saw that were priced far above what they would ever sell for. And then real estate agent, of course, will show comps and try to help you to make you justify buying things and get you to make bad decisions. And so it's like that with a job search. Like, you may be surrounded by friends or family or recruiters or other people that are going to try to get you to take offers because it's in their best interest. But there's all sorts of people that may be trying to get you to make bad decisions. And often it's yourself. You may actually be following some sort of model where you yourself are going to make bad decisions because you will believe that you should be taking a certain type of job or doing something because it's a prestigious firm or it's in a big city and things, and it may not be in your best interest, but you are so programmed to believe that that's the correct thing to do, you'll do that. And the marriages are an example, and I'm going to talk about jobs too, because when you enter into marriage for the wrong reasons, the results are catastrophic. People will be unhappy all day, every day. You'll get up unhappy, you'll go to bed unhappy. Your life will be filled with hostility. If a marriage ends, the divorce can last for years. One partner may be cheating on you all the time and unhappy and withdrawn. People around the people that are in the couple could be unhappy, children and friends, and there's emotional and psychological trauma that some people just never get through. I've seen all sorts of bad things happen, and then people are often held back in their careers and their lives by having that negativity and being consumed with problems. And it's not good. When you're with the wrong person or when you're with the wrong job, it's just a very harmful thing. And you often don't even realize it because you're just blocking things out. You'll block out a bad job or you'll block out a bad relationship. And then when people are in a bad marriage, they may suffer money problems, they may suffer health problems, they may suffer substance abuse problems, and there's just all sorts of suffering that goes along with making bad decisions that frankly isn't there. If you've ever been in a really bad relationship and a really good relationship, there's differences, and there's differences in terms of how you care, what you feel about yourself and how life is for you. And that's a big deal. It's all about compatibility and how things click for both. So it's the same thing with jobs, unfortunately. And so many people join the wrong firms and they have these same issues. And it can be just, I get these calls and they come in quite frequently where someone needs to talk and they're just at this kind of breaking point, and they're often partners and they have never talked to anyone and they're very upset and their lives are falling apart. And it's all because of many times just being in the wrong location or wrong firm or with the wrong people. And so I talk to attorneys about their careers. I've been doing so for just about my entire career. And one of the things I have seen, like I said, is that moving to the wrong firm or being in the wrong firm or the wrong environment can be just as bad of a choice as a bad marriage partner can. It can literally destroy your life. And I know lots of attorneys that by the time I was in my 30s, I started seeing attorneys that were in their late 30s and early 40s dying of heart attacks and all sorts of things that I don't think they would have had in other professions. And the thing is, if an attorney moves for the wrong reason, the odds are pretty good that they'll be doing it again and again. And that's the thing, is that if you're moving firms, the law firm, you may be doing it for the wrong reasons. And law firms will see that and can pick up on it. And just as someone who's been married 4 times would like to divorce again, so too an attorney who's been married 4 times likely move again. I heard something very funny, and I think I might have told this a couple of weeks ago, but my mother had a really good friend that had been married like 7 or 8 times. And the final time he got married was to his very first wife. And she said, "That's incredible. You married the first person you married again?" And he said, "Yeah, because I figured out that every relationship is pretty much the same. And the same problems are following me because a lot of them are caused by me. So some of the time that you may have things that you need to work on that are creating problems and making you unhappy, but other times it is the environment you're in. And most of the time, I think it is the environment. I don't think it's the person bringing the problem to it. Sometimes it is. So I think, and I get attorneys, make placements daily. And so the thing I would say is that I'm all for moving firms, but you have to do it for the right reasons. And when you do move, need to be able to give law firms the right reasons that you're moving. I'm going to discuss in a minute the right and wrong reasons for moving firms, but you just need to understand that you need to really move for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons, and that's important. And if you're moving for the wrong reasons, then you shouldn't do it. You need to be very careful about the reasons that you're moving, and you need to always understand what the right reasons are. And when they are the right reasons, I tell people to move, but when they're not the right reasons, you need to be very careful about moving, because you're often going to do yourself a lot of harm. So here are the right reasons to move and when you should move. So the right reasons are generally related to an ambition to make more of yourself or to escape a toxic environment. And that is really no fault of your own. Now, at the outset, I want to be very clear that many environments are always will be toxic. So there are certain environments that are toxic, but many times wherever you go is going to have level of toxicity. So you just need to be aware of that and understand that if you're going to do well, then you need to make sure that you're able to adapt to different types of environments and get along in different types of environments. And there are attorneys that go to the most toxic firms imaginable but are able to do well because of the way they conduct themselves and the way they interpret the environments they're in. But there's often positions where you actually do need to leave. But what I believe is that the most important thing that law firms want to see, and what almost always gets people hired, is when the attorney is trying to move upward. There's something about the firm that they want to go to that represents a natural progression of the attorney's career. Either they started at a smaller firm and went to a medium one and did really well there, now want to move to a larger one, or they're going to a smaller one to get more expertise and focus in their practice area. There just needs to be something that shows people that law firm can do very well. The person can do very well at that law firm, and that they're trying to really improve themselves, because that sort of ambition can be channeled, and especially when that is in a specific practice group and when the person's trying to get ahead, because the law firm wants people that are hungry and to get ahead and want to get ahead, and then to want to get more work, to want to be challenged more, they want to work with better attorneys and get into bigger legal markets and all that sort of thing. So if the attorney has all that and is really trying to do that, and that's really honest and so forth, then then law firms typically like that. And those are good reasons to move. If you feel you can go someplace where you can not only make a much better salary, but you can have more opportunity, or you can get better, you can do much better in your practice area, then the law firm is going to be very interested in you. And so you need to make sure that you're doing whatever you can to get into the best firms and to move ahead if that's really what is driving you. And another thing that I think is important is many times if you have a connection, that can also be a really good thing. So law firms will like hiring people if there's a connection there. So many times you may have a friend who has a connection at the firm, you may know someone, and that connection means that the law firm will typically protect you during ups and downs. I know people that have family connections and so forth at certain law firms that have done most awful things and have been able to survive inside of large law firms. So, and because of that personal connection, and people that have been brought in by friends and so forth that have done well. So personal connection is a good thing. And it actually feeling protected at your job, being around people that you believe will help you, understanding that there's people that are available that can get things done for you, that can have your back and look out for you, is very good. And I know lots of attorneys that have spent their entire careers at one firm, basically, or two firms or three firms following the same people, and maybe having the same boss. And that can often get you jobs. And those connections are important. I really believe in them. And I think that if you have connections somewhere, and it can't just be like another associate, for example, or someone, it needs to be someone that really could advance your career, but that can make a difference. Connections are also very important. And this is not a very good example, but my grandfather was in the college friend of Thomas Dewey, who was the the founder of a law firm called Dewey Valentine. And when I brought this up in an interview, they seemed to like it, and I ended up getting a job at the firm. Is that a connection? Not really, but it's some sort of connection. And so you need to have connections can get you jobs, but you need to be careful. And that's just something that law firms like. So if you do have a connection and there's a place where you feel like there's people that will protect you and you can do well there, then I often do recommend that you move to those firms sometimes. It's not always, and a lot of times people want to achieve something on their own before they move someplace and use a connection, but I think that can help quite a bit. Then the final thing that I brought up at the beginning, but I just wanted to talk about it real quickly again, is that if you want to work in a more prestigious firm, this is often the right reason, sometimes it's not. Now, generally, if you work in a more prestigious firm, and what you can ultimately accomplish, and I have to be careful about how I say this, but you can often accomplish more, but it's going to be much more difficult to accomplish than you could at a smaller firm. And there's no reason to move just because a firm's more prestigious. But if you're ambitious and up for the challenge, then it often is a good idea to move. And I look very favorably personally on attorneys that are starting out at smaller firms and go through a series of moves to get into more prestigious firms. I think that's a very admirable thing, and very, very few people really set out with that level of enthusiasm and keep trying. But if you keep trying, you can often, and you keep improving yourself, you can continually move to more and more prestigious firms. There's countless attorneys out there that move into AmLaw 100 and AmLaw 50 firms that started out and doing personal injury as solo practitioners. There's all sorts of things that you would never expect them to do, but they just kept improving. And the nice thing about being an attorney that I really is, it doesn't really matter where you start out. It doesn't matter where you go to law school. It doesn't matter how well you did in law school. It doesn't matter the initial experience you have. You literally can work your way up into the very top of the legal profession, except for a few firms, maybe 20, 30 firms. You can get into those firms if you excel enough as an attorney. And that's exciting. And so if you really are trying to get ahead, then law firms love that, and they can harness that ambition, and they can, your drive, they'll put into hours, they'll put into you getting business and then becoming more profitable. And they want that spirit. If you look around you at attorneys you work with, at attorneys you're in law school with, and so forth, you can tell who has that spirit and who doesn't. And that spirit is the enthusiasm for the practice of law, the enthusiasm for growing. That is what law firms want. And if you think about it, who would you want representing you? Would you want a spirited attorney, or would you want an attorney that didn't have that kind of spirit? And I certainly would be someone that would want a very spirited attorney. And I've made the mistake before of hiring attorneys who didn't have that spirit, and it's definitely harmed me. So think about that. If you can get enthusiastic and you really want to work in a better firm, then you need to hold on to that, and you need to continually not let that go, because that's going to take you very far. And a prestigious firm, if that's what you want and you are enthusiastic, will carry more weight, and you can do more ultimately there than you can at a lot of smaller firms many times, but not always. Sometimes there's a lot more advancement potential in smaller firms than there are large firms. But just as someone that got into Yale Law School would probably be crazy to go to Vanderbilt instead, generally, and this is not always, but generally you're going to be much better off taking a position at the most prestigious firm if you're planning on spending your career at a more prestigious firm, and if you feel like you're strong enough to survive and prosper there. And if you don't, then that's another question. But most people will do the best that they can, and you'll rise to the level that you're capable of, and you'll stay at the level you're capable of. That's one of the good reasons to move firms. Another good reason to move firms doesn't always involve working in the most prestigious firm. Many people believe that moving to a prestigious firm is a good idea, but sometimes I think moving to a less prestigious firm actually quite often is a good idea, because if you move to a less prestigious firm, there's often going to be a lot more opportunities for advancement. And if you think about it, there's so many firms out there where it's almost virtually impossible to become a partner, at least as a worker bee. And even bringing in business in those firms is exceptionally difficult because of the caliber of clients that they expect. So if you're in a position where there's not an opportunity for advancement in your current firm because you're at this major firm where even making counsel is next to impossible, then one of the smartest things you can do is move to a smaller firm. If you move to a smaller firm, you can suddenly be a big fish in a small pond. You can use your background to attract bigger clients. and you can do all sorts of things to advance yourself. And that is an important factor. Now, I did put this in the presentation in parentheses, but one of the things that happens is the largest and prestigious firms will often delay making partners, even the very best attorneys, for a long time, because they want to weed people out that just don't have the staying power. So you never know. They want to see who really wants it. And many attorneys who go to smaller firms in-house and so forth might actually have become partners if they stayed, which is pretty funny when you think about it. But most people leave before they're ever evaluated, but if you know, before they ever really have the opportunity to become a partner. But if you're ambitious and you are able to feel like you're not being held back at your current firm, then you may be an excellent choice. You may be able to advance into a much larger firm. You may be better off going to a firm where there's a lot more advancement opportunity. The other thing is that many partners will move to firms that may offer them more cross-selling opportunities. So, for example, at a law firm that only does patent prosecution, an attorney may want to move to a firm that also does patent litigation, corporate, and other types of work. So that the attorney can maintain a closer relationship with their clients and not worry about those clients being poached by other law firms with more resources to handle those sorts of legal matters. So that's often a very legitimate reason for moving law firms as well. And something you need to think about. And there's also many law firms that seem to be constantly experiencing periods of turmoil because of various reasons. Law firms, you may want to have more stability. That's another reason for moving firm. Many law firms are having major problems where tons of partners are leaving, they're losing lots of clients, they're being known as a very difficult place to work. So it becomes in the attorney's best interest to move firms. And an attorney really needs to be in a position to put down roots with the expectation that they'll be able to be there for the future. And so there are law firms, most law firms, by the way, almost all of them go through lots of ups and downs. There's no law firm out there that people haven't forecast doom and gloom for in the past, and some of it is real and some of it isn't. But if the law firm's not stable and having serious ongoing problems, then there's often going to be very good reasons that you may want to leave. And when the law firm's getting ready to go out of business and have all sorts of issues, you often can tell. And it's not just the media, but it's major partners are the best people and that sort of thing. And so if that's happened in your firm many times, it's smart to leave. And the other thing is a lack of stability does not always mean that the law firm's having temporary problems. The law firms, like I said, go through ups and downs and so forth. But many times law firms have issues and people start leaving if the law firm is growing quickly. So the law firm is putting systems into place and people will leave because of that. If the market is slow, many times there's going to be layoffs. If lack of stability may mean that the law firm is coming apart at the seams or constantly seems to be going out of business. And if this is the case, these are often signs you should be looking elsewhere. Another reason that a good reason to move firms is also if you want more work. So what tends to happen is if there's not a lot of work and the work slowdown at your firm has been fairly consistent and going on over time, then that's a sign of trouble. If you don't have things to do and build, and if you're constantly asking for work, and if there's not a lot of work and everybody's complaining there's not a lot of work, then typically what'll happen in any firm is they will lay people off eventually, and they will often do so very quickly. The larger firms tend to act very quickly. The smaller firms, not as quickly. But if you're not profitable for them, then they will often let you go. Now, larger firms, the largest firms typically have very numbers driven and understand exactly what's going on. Many times medium to smaller firms aren't as numbers driven, so they don't always is here. Let me just see. 1 second. I'm sorry. I have to grab some. Sorry about that. Yeah, so the access to work is obviously one of the most important things, and it's a reason that a lot of people leave. Other things that can happen to you at firms as well are many times an attorney can get frozen out. So if the law firm doesn't like you, typically what they will do is they will stop giving you work. And you don't know why that is. It could be because you did a bad job on an assignment. It could be because they decided that they just have no use for you. You often don't even know. But law firms will often freeze people out in an attempt to get them to leave, because the unspoken rule in every law firm is that if you're not getting work, then they think that you will start looking for a job. The other thing too is if you're following partners and the people that you tend to work for the most closely don't have work, that's also not a good sign. And law firms don't have work for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because they do bad work. Sometimes it's because their rates are too high. And sometimes it's because the attorneys aren't aggressive enough in beginning work. But you need to be in an environment that sustains you. And I believe that the most important thing that an attorney needs to be aware of is to always have access to work. The more access to work you have, the better off you're going to be. So you always need to do whatever you can to have access to work. And that, in my opinion, is one of the most important reasons for looking. And it's not to say that you should leave when work slows down. However, anytime there's a consistent lack of work, it's a bad sign because it means your job's at risk. I've seen some of the largest firms in the country. Anytime that there's a work slowdown, whether that means that corporate slows down because there's not enough deal flow coming in, whether it means they settle 2 or 3 cases in a row and then all of a sudden no one's working. What happens at all those times is almost all big law firms will suddenly start letting people go. And it also means that there's fewer advancement opportunities. That there's fewer advancement opportunities for partners, associates, and others. And the more you're able to get access to work, the better off you'll be. The other thing is, another reason to move is for wanting better compatibility with the people that you're working with. So some attorneys simply are not compatible with the people that they're working with. So different people have different personalities. If an attorney doesn't fit in with one group of people, then they're going to be much better off working with other people that they might be more compatible with. There's nothing wrong with moving jobs or switching firms if you're not compatible with a group of attorneys. But sometimes you're just not going to get along with certain types of people. And there's different firms have different personalities and ways of thinking and operating. And you need to be around people that you feel comfortable with. And you're not always going to be comfortable with different types of attorneys. And if you're not, then it often makes sense to leave and look for a new position. And it's the things that there's certain environments that are very conservative. There's certain environments that are very liberal. There's certain environments where the people have all known each other for a long time, or they get together, or they're friends outside of work, and you may not be part of that group. And if you don't feel compatible with the attorneys you're working with, there's nothing wrong with leaving. And if you find a group that you're going to be more compatible with, you really want to be around people that you feel comfortable with. So I think that's also a very good reason. Another thing that's important is being closer to home. I think that a lot of attorneys should be moving closer to home. I think that many times working in the market you grew up with is a very good decision, or in a market you're comfortable with. But I speak to attorneys all the time that drive 2.5 hours to work each day. I was speaking to an attorney not too long ago that lived in LA and was commuting to Fresno for work. Fresno is, I don't know how far it is, it's 3.5 or 4 hours. So he thought the only job he could get was in Fresno. So he was commuting from LA to Fresno, and he didn't do it each day. He had an apartment there, but then he would come home and see his families on the weekends. And this is just, if you're doing something like that, it doesn't make sense. You can definitely get a job closer to home. I know a lot of attorneys that will fly home each weekend to be with their families, as if the only job available for an attorney is you need to fly in a plane. If you're at a firm where if the firm's too far from your home, then relocating to a location that's more convenient is acceptable. There's nothing wrong with relocating to be close to home if you can't move. Now, generally, I advise attorneys to live close to their jobs, but if you can't get a location there, then that's just something to think about. The other thing is that better management. So many law firms are very poorly managed, or they're going through major changes due to the type of management. And the management of a firm makes a big difference. There's cycles that happen in law firms. So what'll happen is the managers, people that are managing the firm will get older, and they'll continue to get older. They'll pay a lot of the older attorneys there that don't have business a lot of money. Then the younger people will be frustrated and want to make more money. So they'll get in management roles, and then they'll start letting dead weight go and making things more difficult for creating higher hour expectations and so forth. So all law firms go through different management cycles. That's just one of them, but there's all sorts of them. And there's always good reasons for attorneys who are not happy with different changes in their law firms to move. But if a law firm's better managed, it can definitely create security for its attorneys and lawyers, more opportunities and other advantages. And if the law firm's not managed, it can often lead to a very toxic culture. So that's also a good reason to move. Another reason is just to spend more time with your family and have a better work-life balance. There are law firms that actually do have a decent work-life balance. Most of the time, the firms that are like that, they're in different markets than major markets. Sometimes they're in major markets, but most of the law firms that have a good work-life balance are in markets where every firm kind of has a good work-life balance. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be part of a family where a firm and so forth, where you can have a good work-life balance. And that's perfectly acceptable. And many people do that. I see people all the time move from major markets to smaller markets, and they can't believe like how much better their lives and careers are since doing that. And that's a good reason to move, to spend time with your family and so forth, if you don't want to work in a major, very hectic firm. And that can be a good reason. And then the other reason, another good reason, is also to easily generate. So many law firms will have billing rates that are so high that the only types of clients that would possibly ever be interested are giant corporations. And it can be very difficult for young attorneys, especially, to generate work there at that if they don't have the ability to network with the largest companies. And so many times they'll go to work in smaller firms that have lower billing rates. And other attorneys may make the decision to do that each year. And that I work with go to much smaller firms so they can generate clients. And if you're able to bring in clients, that gives you a lot more freedom, and you can become a much more successful attorney doing that. So if you really do have a plan to bring in more clients, and you can often do that at a much smaller firm if you have the flexibility to do that. Another reason to move is that if you want a lot more money. So money is not the only reason to move firms, but it can be a very good reason. And sometimes the pay differentials are just absolutely astronomical. So some large law firms may pay 2 or 3 times what a smaller law firm does, or even 4 in a smaller market and in a large market. Money alone should not be a good reason to move firms, but it can be a huge factor. And if you receive an offer from a firm where the pay is just so dramatically different than you're making now, then it's definitely something serious to think about. But one of the things I would say is that in terms of money, I'm often very concerned about money, because when you go to the most prestigious firms, many times what you're doing is you're front loading your compensation early in your career. So even though you may be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as a young attorney, that amount of money that you're making, you're probably not going to be able, you often will not go into a partnership role at that firm. And then many of those attorneys end up going in-house. So if they had been at a smaller firm, many times they would have probably become a partner and made a lot more money later on in their career. It was just an interesting economic little tidbit. Another thing is that if you want more mentoring, so there are law firms that provide mentoring and training to attorneys, and there's some that don't. And that training and mentoring can be a huge difference. So having people that are training you and not just treating you like a commodity to do work, but actually encouraging you and showing you how to develop business and how to meet with clients and how to do depositions and do deals and trials and all this sort of stuff, it can be a huge advantage. And some firms are very good training grounds and others aren't. But if the law firm is willing to invest in you and train you and wants to see you become a better attorney, that's a very positive thing, and it can help you. I had some very good mentors earlier in my career, and they were very helpful. And one of the smartest things I did was clerk for a judge, because I learned a lot of very good habits and so forth working for him that I wouldn't have learned in other types of environments. And so mentoring can be a real advantage. Another reason would be political reasons. There's lots of political reasons to move firms. Sometimes law firms become very political with these different groups fighting about things. And these fights may involve money, client conflicts. You just never know. And if you're on the wrong side of this politics, it can be dangerous to your future. These political fights inside of law firms happen all the time, and you just never know what's going to happen. I personally don't recommend taking part in them at all or taking sides, but if you get involved in these things, those can be reasons to move. Another reason is just you want more challenging work. There are firms where it's challenging and where you may be given very meaningful task or meaningless task, and you have to ask yourself whether or not there's nothing wrong with being given kind of menial work and things when you start your career, but over the long run, if that continues, then it may be something that gives you a reason for wanting to move firms. And then this is a reason that I think is extremely important, is wanting more focused work, or work that is more relevant to your experience or goals. So attorneys in many different types of firms may often find themselves doing work that they're not interested in doing or trained to do. So I've seen patent attorneys with backgrounds in biology and so forth working at only given patents, for example, to work on. I've seen corporate attorneys have to do litigation work when there's not corporate work available for a long period of time. I've seen other attorneys that you may be interested in doing a certain type of work or have the background to do a certain type of work they're getting at their current firm. For example, would be like entertainment litigation or white collar intellectual property litigation. That may not be available at their current firm and they want to do that. And so sometimes the desire to do a different type of work is, if compelling, is often a good reason for an attorney to move law firms, and ones that law firms will accept for that person moving as well. Many attorneys also will get bad reputations at their current firms for a variety of reasons. These could be related to having made a bad mistake, something they said or did that was inappropriate because people didn't like them. So if you get a bad reputation in your current firm, you often just can't recover from those mistakes. One example I saw is an attorney calling a reporter and talking about some confidential client information that got reported in the paper. I saw another attorney get drunk and grab the breast of a company client, like a major client, at a party. I've seen people lose cases because they forget to attach a document, people sleeping in and missing an important meeting, people getting in fights with other associates and causing a scene, people lying about things or talking negatively about people or getting sued for sexual harassment, all these sorts of things, getting sued for malpractice. And I saw a partner get an associate pregnant who had a baby. These are just can give you a sense of the kinds of things that can happen and damage the reputation. And some of these are fixable, others aren't. But what happens to a lot of attorneys is after these things happen, they end up leaving and their firms, and they typically will give other reasons, but sometimes you just can't recover from something that happens. Most of the time is on your side and you do recover. So if enough time goes by, people forget about things, but sometimes you can't. The other thing that a lot of young attorneys do is and this is fairly common, but when they're young, they're learning all sorts of lessons and they're learning how to practice law and they're making mistakes and they're doing dumb things and they're saying dumb things and they don't really understand how the law firm works. And most attorneys, law firms just call them green, and there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of times the attorney just feels so much shame about having been talked to negatively and made mistakes that they often want to go to a new firm where they can craft a new image for themselves as a more competent attorney and hardworking attorney and so forth, to look like they're in a much more positive light. And that can be a smart thing to do, but I don't know that it's always necessary. People are like watching you develop as an attorney. And so even if you're not the best attorney when you start, they can see you compared to the last person you were 6 months ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. The law firm actually can feel good about your. Another thing that is a sign that you probably should leave is if you're getting consistently bad reviews. So a bad review without them giving you really any positive feedback. If you're getting some positive feedback, then that's good. But a bad review means that the law firm is consistently giving you bad reviews. So one bad review is not a bad thing. Typically, if you've gotten some of your first reviews, the way that reviews typically work in most law firms is a summer associate will get a bad first review, and then they'll improve and get a good second review. A young attorney will get fairly bad reviews for their first year. And then after they get very competent, like after their year or 2 years, they'll start getting glowing reviews that are just very good because the law firm's making money off them and wants them to stay. And then if they're doing a very good job, then their subsequent reviews, like 5th year, 6th year, will start saying things like you're on track. And then when you get into your 7th and 8th year, they start getting even more weird, where you might start getting criticized again, or they may even just tell you, we don't think it's going to work out, you should look for a new job, even though your performance hasn't changed from when you were getting good reviews as a mid-level. So that's just the process of it. But if you're getting bad reviews if you've been at a law firm for a couple of years and consistently getting bad reviews, if you're improving your work and still getting bad reviews, then the law firm probably doesn't like you and wants you to go. But not always. You don't always know. And sometimes improving in response to reviews, most of the time improving in response to bad reviews is a smart thing to do. And then if you have a realistic fear of losing your job, that's also a very good reason to leave. One of the things you'll see many times is at firms where there's trouble is people losing their jobs. So you'll see people losing their job because of lack of work. You'll see them getting bad reviews, people that don't have mentors or connections. And if you've seen a lot of that going on and you feel like you're about to lose your job too, then it's probably smart for you to start looking around. It's more difficult to find a job if you leave your current firm without a new job than if you look when you're currently employed. So if you see a lot of people losing their job, especially in your department, in your practice area, and at your level, then you just need to be careful. Your firm needs to be giving you kind of warm fuzzies to some extent. They're going to, the more serious and corporate the firm, the less you're going to get them. But you do need to be told by people that you're okay at some point if you see a lot of people losing your job. And then I brought this up earlier, but some firms are just in serious trouble. And most of the time, if your firm's in serious trouble, you're going to be reading about it in the paper and all that sort of thing. And you don't really need to worry too much about it. But if your firm looks like they're in serious trouble and going out of business, which is very rare, doesn't happen to most firms, but certainly branch offices close and all sorts of things happen. If you see something like that, then it may make sense to look as quickly as possible. Another thing is if you have too much work. I see attorneys all the time where they have way too much work. And there's nothing wrong with having too much work in your first couple of years of practice. But some people have so much work that the firm and staying there is just for your health and sanity doesn't make any sense. And you may be able to handle it, and it can be good for you in a lot of different levels, having a lot of work, but it can also be very bad. And if you just can't handle all the work, then it may make sense for you to look around and to find something else, because it reaches a point where many people just can't handle it. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with leaving your firm if there's too much work. Now, if you're an associate, like a young associate, and you're 2 or 3 years in, you should be working very hard for your first couple of years. That all that experience will make you a very good attorney later on. And getting all that work and repetition is actually a blessing. Many people never get that, and it holds them back their whole career. Every time you're billing 2,500 hours or more per year, you're just ingraining all these habits and thought processes and becoming smarter and faster and more competent than people that don't. There is a rule that says it takes about 10,000 hours to learn something. And I think that in the practice of law, whatever your practice area, about 10,000 hours is what it takes to become reasonably competent. And so the nice thing about a lot of large firms is you will get that experience early on. And if you're doing this at a young age, meaning in your 20s, it's much better to get it out of the way then. But you don't want to burn yourself out. And you do need to force yourself to give yourself breaks. But if you just can't handle it, like you've been doing it for 6 or 7 years and there's just no end in sight, and you don't see the opportunity, then I personally wouldn't stick around. But that's, me. I like also, and that would be also if you're not enjoying yourself. So sometimes, like the job that I have right now doing this, like I very much enjoy it. I'm up at the crack of dawn and work as hard as I can, and I'm engaged in it. So there's nothing wrong with the work that I'm doing. But if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, then that would be a problem if I didn't enjoy what I'm doing. So there's nothing wrong with a lot of work, but if the work is just not something you enjoy, and it's taking energy from you rather than giving it, that's a bad thing. Another thing is sometimes if you're moving home, like for example, where you were from or raised, that can be a very good reason to move. I always encourage attorneys, if you can, to look for jobs in wherever you grew up. Now, that doesn't mean if you grew up in a horrible area of the country that you want to move back there. But many times if you have a family and a network of people there, that's good. And especially when you're trying to raise a family, if people, you can get business there and all sorts of things. So I think many times moving to where you're from is a good thing. Okay, and the next one that I'm going to cover here is wrong reasons to move firms. I'm going to take a 2-minute break. I had someone show up here to interview at the wrong time. So I'm going to go talk to them real quickly, but I'll be like 1 or 2 minutes and I'll come back and do that, and then we'll take questions. The wrong reasons to move firms. And I did want to point out to everyone in terms of the right reasons that one of the reasons I did bring up was the finance reason and is a right reason. Now, that would be more of a personal reason. Typically with law firms, you don't always want to bring up compensation as a reason for moving, because they will know that if you bring that up, that you're likely to leave if someone offers you more compensation. So compensation shouldn't really be your driving factor. One of the other things I would say is most very serious attorneys, like when they become partners and all that sort of thing, they really end up not moving firms because of anything ever to do with compensation. So they will leave because of compensation, but if someone's offering an attorney an extra $200,000 or $300,000 or even $500,000, many times they won't leave. The way that most sophisticated attorneys think about compensation is they think about it as something, does the firm that's offering me less compensation offer me more other types of opportunities? Meaning, am I more likely to make partner? Am I more likely to be able to bring in business? Do I like the people more? I'm going to be more effective and happier at work. So it's just when you choose like someone to marry, do you want to choose someone who's going to look very good on paper, or do you want to choose someone who is nice to you? And you have to decide what works for you. And so that's the same thing with a job. Now, there's always going to be cost for moving law firms. And this is something that's very important for everyone on this call to understand, because leaving a firm is not necessarily a terrible thing, but there's always going to be cost, and the cost can be very significant. So the first thing is that there's a loss of connections. And so when you're at an existing firm, you have connections with people there. And you have political capital and all sorts of things that you may have built up if you're not being forced out that you're not going to have at your new firm. So someone that leaves a firm after 10 years or 15 years is to some extent been protected at that firm. And you go to a new place and you're not going to have that same level of protection. And the danger is if you leave, you're going to be perceived as a job hopper. And if you don't like your new firm either, because you'll be at one firm and then another. Once you're perceived as someone that doesn't stick around at firms a long time, then most new firms you join aren't going to trust you, and we're going to think that you're going to leave them too. So that's just something you need to be very aware of. And you'll start being perceived as a soldier of fortune and not someone who settles down as part of a team. In most large law firms, there's always a contingent of people that were also summer associates there. The law firm tends to think a little bit highly of them, more highly of them compared to people that lateral in at a latter time, because they're just seen more as part of the original community and they're more indoctrinated into the ways of the firm. So every time you leave a firm, it's going to be harder for you to get hired again, and because law firms are going to think you'll leave them too. So that's just something to keep in mind. The benefit of leaving your firm has to be very strong. There has to be, in finding a new position, there has to be some real positives outweigh the negatives. And if there aren't, when a new opportunity comes along that really is a good out for you, the law firm may have a hard time believing that you're a good fit, that you really want to move. So I brought this up on multiple webinars before, but all law firms want to hire people they believe are going to be with them long term. If you have a few bad moves on your resume that suggest you're not a team player, then it's always going to be harder for you to get a new position. Law firms will always avoid people that have too many moves. They will also hire people that have fewer moves rather than more moves when they're making hiring decisions. When you get hired, if you had a lot of moves, they also won't trust you. And therefore, it's very important to move for the right reasons. I interview people all the time that, and I can see how people with a lot of jobs make it through, because usually what happens is when I interview someone, they've already been interviewed at our company by several people. And so when they get to me, like I'm interviewing them, and I'm not necessarily the last person to interview them, but it's someone that always thinks they're really good. And so when I interview that person, like I notice a lot of times that people will get through that have had a job every year for the past 5 or 6 years or 7 years. And it could be for any random position. And if they come here, they're going to leave too. So you can't hire people like that. And it's not smart, but they make it through and they get hired, and you can get hired too. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you've had several jobs, you're probably going to move. And some people are able to do it and get jobs. So just like I'm showing you that people make it through, and even listen, a human resources company, there are people that make it through and that I end up talking to, but I certainly don't hire them. And if I did hire them, I would believe that they were going to leave later on. And people get jobs when there's compelling reasons for each move. So if you've had 4 jobs in 5 years and you keep moving to better and better firms, you switch cities or you moved with a partner from your firm to another, that may be okay, especially when you're moving to better firms. But if there's not a lot of upward mobility, these are some of the reasons that I don't think are good to move. One of the reasons people move is that they get bored. They get bored with their law firms and the routine. This is never a reason for moving. A lot of times you go to a new environment and you think it's exciting, but if you're bored in your job, you're probably bored with the practice of law itself. A lot of people just don't like the routine of going in the office and working and doing what they're doing. And there's nothing wrong with not liking the practice of law. If you don't like it, you can do something else. I know plenty of attorneys that have become very successful doing all sorts of things, whether it's opening pizza parlors or selling things or starting businesses, selling collectibles. I can think of a million different things people have done. And it's just, it can be fun. And attorneys are so skilled, but you need to enjoy whatever you're doing. It doesn't mean necessarily the firm. If you're bored practicing law, it's the subject matter of what you're doing that should interest you, not just the job. And if the subject matter is not interested in you, then there's something wrong. You should, and I hate to say this, but you should enjoy regardless of what you do, you should enjoy the minutia of it, the things that people don't think are fun, the things that people think are fun. If you're a litigator, you should enjoy discovery. You should enjoy writing briefs. You should enjoy going to court and doing most of the things that you do. Now, you don't have to enjoy all those things. Some attorneys don't want to go to court, which is fine, but you should enjoy aspects of your job a lot, and they should be fun for you. And you should look at them as creative exercises and things to improve at and so forth. And if you don't, then if you don't like the subject matter, then that's a problem. Years ago, a friend of mine called me and told me I should go work at his firm because they were a bunch of entertainment attorneys walking around doing all these deals, running around in the convertibles, talking on cell phones. This is before cell phones were common, putting together movie deals and so forth. And that sounded like a lot of fun. But when I got to the firm, I discovered that it was just the same thing as every other law firm, just a bunch of attorneys sitting behind desks doing different types of the same type of work. And it just looked like everywhere else. And I was bored and took the interview. One of the things I've noticed too, so just remember that most firms, it's about the work. Certainly there's places that are more exciting to do the work in, but most firms, it's going to be about the work. Another reason to look for a job is that people look for jobs, and I don't think is a good thing, is because they need attention and validation. I have all sorts of problems. I'd like to shop for cars and trade cars in once every several years. I like doing that. I don't know why. You can pretty much drive a car forever now, so there's no reason to, but I enjoy the process of looking at cars. That's not a smart thing. Some people enjoy the process of looking for jobs, and some people are constantly doing a job search. And when they get out there, they're validated, and it's exciting getting interviews and getting people to like you. And a new interview can change, a great offer can change your life, but it's not healthy. It's like getting married and constantly searching for a new companion, or constantly searching for a new car when your car is perfectly fine. It's just sometimes you're better off just being happy with what you have, and you don't need that validation. And that's something that I would think about if you just you need attention and validation, or you feel like you're not being treated well, so you find a firm that will treat you better. That's something people do too. Another thing is a lot of times people are afraid of failure. So I see a lot of times attorneys move from firm to firm because they're afraid of failure. And actually to think about it, I think I may have done that in the past too, where I moved firms because I wanted nothing but positive feedback. And I think when sensing the possibility of not getting all positive feedback made me want to move. And so I think people have done that. I think a lot of people do that, and especially very highly motivated people. They're very perfectionist, and they don't want to be criticized, or their identity is based on being very good at what they do. It's a little bit far out what I'm saying, but one of the things I would say is that most attorneys that start out in large prestigious firms leave before they ever have the opportunity to be considered for a partner. And I wonder if a lot of that has to do with they're just afraid of failing. They don't want to fail. And I think that's definitely a possibility, that they don't want to invest that much in themselves into it and fail. And I just remember myself personally when I was at a great firm when I started off my career, and getting very positive feedback. And then I was worried. What was I worried about? Oh, I was worried about some discovery or something that I'd been on in a case not going as well as I thought it should be, because I was supposed to be, I think, I'm supervising all these people doing a document review. And so I was just worried about that. And so I allowed that worry in the back of my mind to create tension where there shouldn't have been. No one ever even said anything to me about it. So I think many times people are afraid of failure. And most attorneys, by the way, join large law firms declaring that they're going to be partners. So they're going to be partners in these law firms. And some of them go in as failures, saying, I want to go in-house even before they get a job working for a large law firm. What happens to most attorneys is something psychs them out along the way. The environment's too hard of a pressure cooker, the stress is too much, and they often leave, I think, because they feel they're going to fail before they've ever put in a concerted effort. And I've learned, that many times people are looking because they are afraid of failing, and there's nothing wrong with failing. And if you're failing in a law firm, they're not just going to tell you to leave that instant. And most of the time, they're going to give you feedback, and you should use that feedback to become a great attorney. If you go to a law firm where there's no feedback, then that's a real danger. So the best law firms are going to really poke you in every different direction and show you how you can improve, which is actually a very good thing. When you go to work at the worst law firms, you get the least amount of feedback, and the best law firms are going to give you the best amount of feedback. And I don't think you should worry about failing. I think that shouldn't be a reason to leave. I think if you feel like you're failing, that means the law firm you're at is very good. And you're being pushed by the atmosphere to become better and better. And that's a positive thing. And then the other thing that a lot of times people will leave for, and this is a good and bad thing, but they want to move to a more prestigious or hotter law firm. Moving to a more prestigious law firm can be a good reason to leave, but just moving to a more prestigious law firm is not. There's always going to be more prestigious or hotter law firms out there than the one you're at. And in your job, where you're working shouldn't be like a fickle popularity contest with a constantly moving scoreboard where your firm's hot one day and not the next, and the next is hot. You can't always be on the winning team or the one that looks the best. And you just can't move for that reason. And there's always going to be things that look more attractive where you're at, but it's not necessarily a reason to move. Another reason is if you want more money. I don't think you should ever move unless there's a ton more money, and probably at least 30% more. But I don't think that leaving for money is always the best thing. I think you should be more concerned about things like stability, connections, and other things that make that law firm a smart choice. Even a 30% raise once taxes are taken out isn't going to make a major difference in your life. And one trade-off that comes with more money is definitely less security, and that expectation you're going to work a lot harder. So you're going to give up a lot of your lifestyle and so forth for that. One of the things I do all the time is I move these from markets like New York City and Chicago to smaller markets. So they'll go to work, and someone from Chicago will go to work in another St. Louis, not St. Louis necessarily, but a smaller market where they're from, maybe Omaha or something, and I'll move them there. And all of a sudden they're going home at 5 or 5:30 every day. They're going to their kids' sports events. They're relaxing. They're taking the weekends off, and they're basically doing the same thing. They're just not working as hard, and the culture of their firm's not the same. And they're living in a house that's probably bigger. They're living in a neighborhood that's probably safer. They're spending, and they're happier. And their house costs 40% or 30% of what it would in the major market, and the money doesn't make a difference. The money is all figurative, but sometimes not having, it depends on the market you're in and the people you want to surround yourself with, how important money is. And most large paychecks are going to be in major markets with lots and lots of work. And if you're working in a major firm, you're to some extent making a deal with the devil. And that means that you're front loading your compensation, you're giving the best years of your life in exchange for working very hard, and it's up to you. But I don't know that money is always the right reason to move. But if it's a major amount of money, then that's a good idea many times to move. And then some of the things that I think are really, one of the things I think is really the most important is having an inability to face issues. To some extent, the feedback you get from a firm is going to be around things like your ability to work against deadlines, your ability to not turn in assignments unless they're 100% perfect. Meaning you can't, in most large law firms, you can't turn in a memo with typos and errors and stuff and expect the law firm, the partners to take you to really appreciate that. You have to do things perfectly. You have to not be careless. And so if you're having problems with that, you may be having personal problems with people. So you may be having issues with people that you're working with. You may make mistakes that you could be working on. Your personal life may be interfering with your work life. You may have substance abuse problems. There's all sorts of issues that people have, and then you may not be able to cope with the stress of your job. And so you don't always need to leave your firm. You just need to figure out what the problem is with yourself and fix that. Sometimes it's as simple as just some people will go see therapists, or some people will actually just go see coaches because they don't want to have they think it's a bad thing to see a therapist, like it means there's something wrong with them, which there's not. The most successful people in the world see therapists. Even people that have been presidents of the United States see therapists while they're president of the United States. It's just, there's things you need to do to take care of your mind and your body and be effective. And so facing issues that you have that you think are holding you back is a good thing. And running from firm to firm isn't always going to change those things. Many will do it consistently. I know attorneys that have had very serious substance abuse problems that change firms every year and a half when that interferes with their job. It's not, the firm isn't the problem, they're the problem. And so if they'd fix those issues, they'd probably be much happier. And that's just an example. Addictions, other things. So getting bad reviews, I talked about that earlier, but just because you get a bad review and don't feel appreciated doesn't mean you should leave. That means you should improve. And so even 2 bad reviews in a row don't mean you should leave the firm. You can't expect everyone to like you. You can't expect to be perfect, but you can take the coaching to get better. And just remember that the better you're at, the more reviews you're going to get that could be positive or negative, and the more negative reviews you're going to get. And so use those negative reviews to improve. And then another one is too much work. So a lot of firms have too much work. But as I said earlier, having a lot of work is generally a very good thing, especially earlier in your career. It means that the firm's healthy, is doing something right. If there's a ton of work, it means there's opportunities for advancement. It means there's opportunities for you to get better at your job. And all sorts of things. It's typically not a great idea to announce to an employer that you're looking for a new job because there's too much work. Law firms like having work. It's how they make money. The smartest thing you can try to do is make things work if you have too much work, and just do the best you can. And then you should enjoy the work you're doing. It should empower you to some extent and make you feel good. And if you like what you're doing, then you shouldn't mind the long hours. But if you don't like it, you may want to look for something different. There's nothing wrong with working long hours at all if you like what you're doing, and it's not interfering with other aspects of your life too much. But if you have way too much work and you can't handle it, then you should leave. But if you are leaving just because there's a lot of work, then that's always not a good idea. And then some people will leave just because they without any reason. I hear people leaving on a weekly basis just because, and they don't really have any reasons to move. And so that's not a good reason either. Law firms will always ask you why you're moving. And if you can't give a good reason, that's a bad thing. I talked about this earlier, but morale at your current firm is also not a reason to move. If the morale is not great, that doesn't really mean a lot. It just means that you have to, most times law firms will have periods of low morale and high morale, and they're like individuals. So you just have to work through that and not let that affect you. Sometimes people will move because they don't have friends at their firm. It shouldn't be really a factor in you moving, but if the environment's not something you like, then that's not a good thing either. Most of the time, if you stay there long enough, you will learn to make friends, and you're at work for professional and not social reasons. Other people will leave because they don't like their current assignments and how they're being staffed. You're in competition for different types of assignments, and you should try to get better assignments. If you're not happy with the assignments you get, you should do whatever you can to try to get better assignments. And then many people just have an invisible clock. There's certain attorneys that move every year. There's certain attorneys that move every 2 years. There's certain attorneys that move every 3 years. I don't know why that is, but you shouldn't really think that you need to move consistently. You should do whatever you can to stay and not have kind of this clock inside of you that thinks it's time to move, because moving isn't necessarily going to help you. Having political capital somewhere will help you. Showing loyalty will help you. And if you have that loyalty, the law firm's more likely to reward in the future when they're thinking about laying people off or who to make partner or not. To the extent you can, you shouldn't move for just any reason. A lot of times people will move because there's people that they don't like at the firm. So they may decide that there's people that they aren't getting along with, and they'll feel that if that person doesn't like them, then all is lost. I had an instance once when I was at a firm, and this woman didn't like me very much. It was a partner that I'd done some work for. And I found out later that she didn't like any associate that ever worked with her. And not only that, but she was losing her job. But I took it very seriously at the time and thought it was a reason to look for a job. And it's not. Typically, time heals wounds. And if there's enemies in the firm, I wouldn't worry about that too much, unless the person is so powerful, it's going to really do you a lot of harm later. There's lots of reasons to move firms, but if you move haphazardly, that's not a good idea. Some of the questions that I would ask is if your job is just completely intolerable and if that's going to last, why you would be happy in the new position, if your current position is beyond repair, whether or not this is a short-term or medium-term thing, and are there things about yourself that can make you better if you fix them. A very interesting thing is like the environments that you're in will tend to press out almost like a factory, a certain type of attorney based on the feedback you receive. So learning in a major firm and taking that feedback can make you a very good attorney. And then the potential you'll have in a new position. But sometimes you'll know in your heart that it's not going to work. Maybe you're not invested in it, or the firm isn't invested in it when you just feel like it's not going to work. But it's a very serious life decision. And I think that if in the extent of not moving up and having trivial reasons for moving, it's not always a good idea. I just would look at these reasons very closely. I apologize it's taken me so long to go through all this. I know it is a lot of information. I tried to go fairly quickly because it is a lot to say. But I'll take a quick break for just like maybe 2 minutes again, and then I will come back with questions. If you have any questions about this or anything that I've spoken about today, or any questions about your career, anything related, I will take questions, as many questions as everyone has. And this is actually my favorite part of the week, is taking these questions. I actually like it better than doing these webinars. I love the questions. There's always such good questions, and anything that you're thinking about is really important to ask, because many times when you answer these questions or ask these questions, you're asking the same questions that everyone else has, and you're asking them anonymously most of the time, feeling like you're having problems at work, or you can't take it, or you're doing certain things wrong. Those are all things that everyone else has questions about too. The more questions you guys ask, the better. So next, I'll be back in probably 2 minutes. All right, I'm going to start with questions. Yeah, so as many questions as you guys have. Let me just 1 second here and open blank document. First question. Yeah, thank you for these questions, the guys, anybody who's asked them. So just try to keep asking as many as you guys have, and I will answer them. It doesn't look like there's a lot of questions so far today, which is fine. But is it more difficult to move into bigger firms if you are, let me just make this a little bigger here, 250. You are in a practice area like general commercial litigation. If so, how important is it to have gone to a prestigious law school, to have law review, et cetera? So it is more difficult to move into bigger firms. Commercial litigation is a very kind of difficult practice area at the moment for movement. I don't know why. Things go in cycles, but commercial litigation has been a much more difficult practice area lately. Most of the positions in litigation are not with the most prestigious and largest firms. They're with smaller firms. I don't know why that is, but there's definitely a lot of opportunity now in small to mid-sized firms, but in larger firms, not as much. And New York City has been very slow for commercial litigation for quite a while. But yeah, it is more difficult. And having gone to a prestigious law school and have law review and so forth is important for litigators. I don't know why. One of the things I would say for litigation, and one of the reasons litigation is difficult, is because the problem is there's just too many litigators. So most attorneys are litigators. So most attorneys that come out of law school become litigators. It's when you think of what an attorney does, everyone thinks of litigation. They don't think of corporate law and all these other things. So most attorneys are litigators. So in order to distinguish between different types of attorneys, qualifications become more important. So if you're like a corporate attorney, so an example would be, so this is an example, and I want to explain to everyone why it's important. So as an example would be, if you have 300 people graduated from University of Minnesota Law School, which is a great school. So out of those 300 people, probably 175, I would say maybe 175 will do something litigation related. 25 will do something, maybe 50 will do something unrelated to the practice of law, not related to law practice. And you're left with 75 corporate, tax, patent, real estate. So just think about that. So then out of that 75, maybe you get, and I'm not saying this is an accurate number, but maybe out of that you get 20, 25 are, maybe 20, 25. For all these people, the law firms are going to drill down and eliminate based on qualification. And for the corporate people, they just cannot possibly as discriminate. Because there's not as many of them. And these sort of ratios, you're not going to see these same ratios at, for example, NYU, because NYU is a big law school in New York, so a lot of people are going to go into. But you'll see something very similar to this in litigation in most places. So that's one of the reasons that litigators should understand why it's so difficult. And the other thing is that the reason they like law review and all that sort of thing is because they need to be able to really make sure that the people that they're hiring that have the right experience. And so they need to make sure that they're hiring the best people for the jobs. And so they don't have as many. They have a lot of options with litigation than large law firms compared to other practice areas. As a recruiter, it's obviously much more attractive to me to work with people that have a lot of these practice areas, because they're obviously much more marketable because there's fewer of them. Whereas litigation, they really need you to have really good qualifications. Now, I place probably more litigators than all these people because litigation is where most of the attorneys are. But at the same time, I would say 100, maybe 100 is probably better. Yeah. At the same time, you have to place a lot of these people at smaller firms. So there's more litigation jobs as well. Okay. That was a great question. This next question is a great one. My current firm is a small, and whoever asked the first question, that was a good question, because I think that's a question I've always wanted to answer. Thank you. The current firm is a small firm. It does not have a lot of cases to work on. The owner is struggling to get new clients. If I have an interview and ask if I want to leave, can I mention this as a reason? Yes. There's nothing wrong with that. You can say you really like the firm and him, but if you just don't have a lot to work on, yeah, you have to look out for your self-interest, and that's definitely a good reason to firm. And it doesn't sound like anything's going to change. It's just one owner. That's a great reason to look for a job. And you should. I don't think anything's going to change. I think you should, unless he's young and learning how to bring in cases, or she's young, then you can. I don't think. Yeah, I think those are all very good reasons. So thank you for that question. Up in my career to larger firms, and I'm just only starting, but I already feel boxed in. I'm at a top 10 law school, but didn't end up with a large firm this summer. That's okay. Nevertheless, I was able to get a summer associate in the nick of time doing commercial litigation. I'm from New York, though, and I feel like I missed the boat. I know a federal clerkship would help, but not even at my top 10. It's like clerkships are only available, even in smaller markets like Maryland, Connecticut, with the top 10% of students. And I don't know if I could distinguish myself with a large New York firm coming from a smaller firm. What are the steps I can take to get ahead? I know there may be benefit to working at a smaller firm, but the driving motivator was to hopefully work with these large law firms. Okay. Yeah. So you need to think about what your goals are. And this is a good question. This is one of the problems with top 10 law schools, well, problems with any top law school are the goals. The goal is working at a large law firm the best idea for you? Is it? I think that's a good question. And you have to ask yourself if that really is the best idea. And I don't know. But if your goal is to work at a large law firm, and why that's been your goal since going to law school, I don't know why that's your goal. And that would only be for you to answer. But what I would submit to you is your goal should be the best attorney you're capable of being. And if you're the best attorney you're capable of being, then everything else is fall from that. And it doesn't have to be at a large law firm. The problem is if the goal of being the best attorney you're capable of being versus the goal of working in the largest law firm, those two may not be compatible, because a large law firm isn't necessarily going to make you the best attorney you're capable of being. It may, but it may not. If you want to get a federal clerkship, there's nothing wrong that I don't think that you have to be the top 10, 20% of your students. Judges can hire whoever they want. And there's 600 or 7, I don't know what the number is these days, but there's hundreds of federal district court judges. And you don't have to be at the top of your class to get a job with any of them. They hire who they like. Each of them has individual hiring standards. They can be in a large market or a small market, so you can work there. In terms of the firms, you can work in a big market or a small market. It doesn't matter where the large law firm is. Typically, the most sophisticated cases do go to attorneys in big markets. So the large law firms in the largest markets typically will take the biggest cases. So if there's a very significant company in Indianapolis and they get sued, they'll probably have a firm in New York or Chicago or someone work on it, as opposed to a local firm, because the perception is they have the best attorneys. So you can definitely get a job in a major New York law firm coming from a smaller firm. One of the things that you should try to do is you should try to get a federal clerkship. You should also try to get the actions that I would take I would best grades possible the rest of this year, grades possible this year or next. I would try to get the clerkship. I would do mass mailings near firms in the summer, in the next year. I would do on-campus interviewing, and you may be surprised, but you can probably get things through on-campus interviewing as well. Interviewing with firms do not mass email. I would contact alumni for information interviews if possible. The biggest thing I would do, and this is going to be contrary to what you want to hear, but I'm going to tell you this anyway. The biggest thing I would do is I would work my ass off in the summer job. So you want to go in there and you want to work hard. You want to be appreciative, do whatever you can to impress everyone. Forget you're not working in a large firm. I'll tell you a couple quick stories, but most of the people that I know a lot of people that I know that have become very famous in Hollywood are just very nice people. They were nice people before they became famous. They were nice people after they became famous. I'm trying to think. One example would be like Bradley Cooper. He came and rented my house one year over Christmas while I was out of town. But this is before he became successful. He was the nicest you could imagine. He came and only stayed for a couple nights. He left, I think, a case of champagne. And I was not the kind of person that would have anything to do with his career, but he was just very memorable and very nice. And now he's obviously, this is before he became very successful. So this is how people behave that become very successful. They do a very good job wherever they go. And they, regardless of what's happening to them, they're appreciative, they're nice, they're easy to work with. They give everything that they have to whatever they're doing, and they're memorable. And so you need to make the best possible impression you can on the people you work with this summer. You need to be grateful for what you have, and you need to be excited about what you're doing. And there's all this studies and things about, and I don't want to be like the person that's rehashing this gratitude crap, because I hear so much about it. It's just ridiculous. But gratitude is important from the standpoint that when you approach things positively, when you approach people and circumstances positively, people like that in the situation. And it makes a big difference. So that, being very happy with that, showing your grades are improving. If you work really hard and you come across with that sort of enthusiasm in your job, when you interview for clerkships, you will do better, and everything will fall into place. You'll learn how to things to say in interviews, how to behave. We will learn how to, things will go in your direction. I don't know how to explain it. And the other thing I would just do is what's called a manifestation exercise. And so you just want to spend, and I spend maybe, and I don't do enough of it, but I spend 15 minutes a day, 10 to 15 minutes a day, imagining what you want your life and career to be like. In your case, it would be, working in New York, working for a big law firm, what you would be doing, and just keep imagining all this stuff. And if you do that, everything's going to fall into place. You will get it. If you're going to a top 10 law school and you really want to do all this stuff, then you will get these jobs. It's not really, but this is how you do it. And I would recommend doing a manifestation exercise and doing that. It's a great book. It's called Think and Grow Rich. You can get it for free online, and I would read it cover to cover. And in this book, it talks about all sorts of things. You need to want something. This is the first chapter is about desire. The next chapter is about all these different things. And I try to read it once per year. I remember once Tony Robbins saying something that he said that he knows a guy that reads it once a year is successful. He knows another guy that reads it 2 or 3 times a year is even more successful. He knows a guy that reads it 5 times a year is 10 times successful. It's just, it tells you how to set goals and imagine things that will happen. And anybody that wants to get ahead, you need to imagine things and take all the right actions and really be seen as a person that people want to. And so you're never boxed in. If you're 10 years out and you want to work in a larger firm, you can do it. But you need to have the goal and the drive, because most people lose their ambition. I think one of the things that I talked about in this webinar today is most people leave large law firms. They get psyched out. Most people get psyched out. And the only people that end up getting where they want to go is persistence. Persistence is the most important thing there is. And so if you persist, then you'll get to where you want to, and it always happens all the time. And people that don't, if you persist, you will. So you just can't give up. People that give up are the ones that get ahead. I have a funny story to tell about giving up, but I remember there was this guy, and it's kind of a funny story. I think he's a professional gambler now, but his name is Tom Vu. And when I was in college in the 90s, in Chicago, or actually early 90s, but it doesn't matter. But when I was in Chicago, there was all these ads on television of him like on these boats, like driving around with these girls in bikinis. And it was very funny. I don't know, I might even be able to show you guys what this Tom Vu ad. It's very funny. But this ad of Tom Vu, it was so funny. It's the greatest ad ever. Let's see here.
Inside Verbooks is about to become the backdrop for an unforgettable vacation.
The knowledge you will learn at my seminar will make you financially independent for the rest of your life.
One of my recent
You'll have the best grades of your life. Come to my seminar.
using the Tom Vu techniques.
Anyway, so this Tom Vu, I saw this ad, and he had this seminar where you could go downtown. And so I went, and it was basically, you go downtown, and I waited, and it was basically, if you come down, you're going to hear 3 words, and these 3 words will change your whole life and everything. And so I was like, all right. And so I went down with my friend on a Saturday morning, and he was giving a seminar. And the 3 words he said, that he'd come over from Vietnam and had been working as a busboy in a country club, and a very rich guy came in that everyone said was very rich. And he said, can you tell me 3 words that made you successful? And the guy said, yes, there's 3 words. And he said, the 3 words are don't give up. And so what happens is almost everyone gives up, and that's what I got out of the Tom Vu seminar. I guess you had to pay to actually attend his seminar after going to this pre-seminar. But I saw that commercial on TV, and I never forgot that, because that's the mistake that most people make, is they give up. So you just can't give up. You need to keep pursuing whatever you're trying to do. Okay, let's see here. Great questions, by the way. I love that one. Okay. I work with a big law firm. I was passed on promotion for becoming a senior associate. In fact, I was the only one passed on from being promoted. It's been a difficult year. Personal emergency home. However, wasn't the reason cited to me. I believe I should have been promoted, all things considered. Yes, there were issues, but no red flags. And I improved my performance post mid-year and annual review. Not becoming promoted apart from the prestigious level also hurts me monetarily. Not becoming. Okay, should I switch to other firms if they're offering me 30% increment promotion? One issue is that my current firm supported me during my personal emergency, and that there's an ethical angle sticking around. They may not have promoted you because of the personal emergency, so that's probably what I would say, and I probably would think about that. So if you're the only person that had that personal emergency, they probably just couldn't promote everyone, so they may have just used that as an excuse not to promote you. But if you feel that there are some issues, to be a senior associate and then to make partner at a firm is a difficult thing. And if you feel like the people that are around you that's much more likely to happen to them, and you've studied studied everything and believe that, then my recommendation to you probably would be to look at other firms. But if not, then you certainly can stick around. 30% raise is a good raise, but it's up to you, I guess, is my ultimate point. But not getting promoted is not a good thing. If everyone else was promoted, I don't know how many people there were, but I would think about that. But to me, it sounds just you just didn't get the promotion because you had a personal emergency and you need to take time off, and probably you'll get the promotion next year if you do well. But if you think it's something else, then I probably would look at jobs. And only if you've been there from a long time, then that's also another reason to stay. Which is better to you, according to you, for a 5th year or corporate associate, big firm or smaller law firms? Okay, that's a great question. If you guys have any more questions, my last question, I'm happy to get off the call, but this is the last question what he has. So I think that it depends on what your goal is. If you're a corporate associate and your goal is to go in-house, then you're almost always better off coming from a bigger firm. The bigger firm is going to provide a better brand. And law firms like having people coming from bigger firms. Not in-house companies prefer people from bigger firms because they're coming from brand name places and they trust the training. So if your goal is to go in-house, you're better off staying or being at a big firm. If you feel like you can bring in clients to the big firm, then the big firm sometimes has a better name. So larger clients may be more comfortable using a big firm than a smaller firm. So that can help you. If you want to build a practice of smaller to mid-sized companies or kind of tech companies or newer companies, then the smaller firm might be better for you. So it's all kind of a question of the types of companies you want to work for, the types of firm, the types of clients you want to bring in. And if you want to bring in big company clients, then you're probably better off at the big firm. Corporate work too, you're more likely to get more sophisticated corporate work at a larger firm, but not necessarily. Sometimes you could work at a smaller firm that has more sophisticated work as well. One thing I notice in recessions, and when the economy is doing very well, attorneys will typically be fine at larger law firms. When the economy slows down, larger law firms will very rapidly cut people generally. And when those big law firms cut people, what that means is it's very difficult to hold on to your job, even as a senior associate, especially as a senior associate and a junior associate. But smaller law firms do not cut people as much. They tend to work for smaller companies, and those smaller companies tend not to have as many problems. Okay, thank you everyone for attending. I apologize that I had a couple interruptions at the beginning. I don't know why. I had an interview scheduled, but I took care of it. And I appreciate all the questions, and we will talk next week. Thanks again.